Hello, everybody. Paul Elam here with thevoiceformen.com, and I am sitting across computer land from the lovely and talented Dr. Tara Palmatier. Would you like to say hi to everybody?
We're back.
Yes, we are. Oh, and before we even get started, we're going to be talking about healthy relationships today. That's not exactly a good start to a discussion on healthy relationships, but you know what? It's real. But before we get to
They,
talking
they,
about,
they do exist. They really do exist. Click your
yes,
heels
well,
together 3 times. Say there's no place like home. They really do exist.
they exist, but not in the way you think they do.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll be getting into that. First, I just wanted to spend just a couple of minutes bragging on A Voice for Men staff again for the incredible work they did putting on the conference, the International Conference on Men's Issues. I want to brag also especially on Dr. T here for what was, I think, a home run out of the park. I mean, if you go to the videos now and look at the comments, the reactions from people to Dr. T's presentation, where we finally had somebody at a major event getting up and telling the truth about the lives of men who get involved with high conflict women, and what sort of damage can be done, and exploring the origins of that in this culture, which is really a big part of what she and I are trying to do here together, is sort of look at all those issues. But the presentation, Dr. T, was just absolutely incredible. I can't wait to see the next one at the next conference, which we're going to be announcing before too terribly long here. But anyway,
Sure.
now that I have built Dr. T up to the point that she can never reach that height again, which is an equal way to sabotage somebody, I want to talk a little bit about
Yes.
relationships for the MGTOWs in the audience who have sworn off women altogether. I would say, in many ways, you could call that a healthy relationship with yourself. I certainly think that it's every man's choice to not be in relationships at all, but most men do. And most men don't get the information from the general counseling psychological community, basically the feminized bullshit version of what relationships are supposed to be, according to Cosmo and the Good Men Project. They get a little bit better information here. And what we've done for how many episodes of this show have we done?
Oh gosh, not that many because we had the almost a 2 month hiatus from when your holiday and then the conference. So I think we've done maybe 4 or 5, maybe.
Yeah, something that many, but in each one we've talked a lot about unhealthy relationships. We've talked about unhealthy people. We've talked about particularly high conflict women and how that affects men in relationships. But it's one thing to keep talking about the problem, which we need to do, because other than here, a couple of other places, maybe shrinkformen.com, you're not going to hear anything what men really need to hear about unhealthy relationships and about why it's okay to turn your back to them and go away, and why you should. But we wanted to talk today a little bit about healthy relationships and what they look like. And of course, that is, as you could tell by the laughter we shared at the beginning of this, at the very words healthy relationship, we have to take all this with a grain of salt. All this is a matter of opinion. If it doesn't, if the shoe doesn't fit, don't wear it. But I'm going to start things off by talking a little bit about relationships in general. One of them is that there is stages to most relationships, and one's very short in the beginning. It's called infatuation. That's where you can't wait to rip each other's clothes off every time you get behind a closed door, and Cupcake would never do anything ever to harm you because she's the most wonderfulest, most perfect specialist snowflake that has ever existed in all of human history. You don't know what you were doing with life before you met her, and Cupcake feels exactly the same way about you. That's not love. So the first thing I want to say is to get out of the way that biochemical reactions to make you bond with somebody by making you a little bit psychotic is not love. And a lot of people make the mistake of going and chasing that after it starts wearing off, and they're never going to find it again. But
I'd like to add too, if the individuals in question have family of origin issues of dysfunction or abuse, oftentimes that inexplicable, strong chemistry or feeling towards the other person is, in my opinion, and not just my opinion, there are others who agree with me, it's sort of an unconscious recognition of, oh boy, I get on the crazy roller coaster, and this time it's going to be different. No, it's not.
Yes, this time my mother's going to treat me like she should have back then, and
this
guess
time
what?
my father will be kind and loving, and yes, and
Yes, and I'll make that happen, and that's why people go pick somebody just like their dysfunctional parent. And by the way, all this stuff, gay relationships applies the same thing. We happen to be talking about men and women, but we're not leaving anybody out. These are human equations that happen. But what happens next after the infatuation wears off in a relationship is you go into what's generally called a power struggle. And that's where you bring all the rules of your either reasonably healthy or very, very sick and dysfunctional family into the relationship. And, you know, that means that Christmas presents are opened on Christmas Eve, not on Christmas Day, and that you do this way, and here's the rules of communication, and here's what you say and don't say, and all the things that you grew up with that become normalized for you in your life. And then you set about in your relationship wanting to operate by those rules. The only problem is that you've got somebody else on the other side of the equation who has brought all in their history and all of their family rules and all of the ways that life is supposed to work for them, and then you start doing this. And folks, it lasts a long, long time. Most couples, I believe, again, opinion, will spend upwards of 20 years in the power struggle trying to figure out what rules that are going to live by in that particular unit. And it causes a lot of conflict. That is where a lot of relationships fall apart, of course, because they can't come to an agreement on what rules are going to happen there. So we have to separate here, one, the difference between love and infatuation, and also the difference between, I would say, normal and healthy. Conflict is normal. You are supposed to have it. If you're not having conflict in a relationship, then you're not connected to somebody. And if you're not having conflict, it might mean that you have no boundaries and you're just doing what you're told, or you're avoiding issues in the relationship. But if you are in a relationship, you are going to have conflict with somebody. As a matter of fact, I was talking to Dr. T just before we started this and using myself for an example. It wasn't an hour before this show. I got into it with my girlfriend, and we both acted like we were 4 years old for about 5 minutes, and then we both grew back up and got over it and moved on. That's a normal part of a healthy relationship, is sometimes dysfunctional handling of things. Nobody gets out of it without that.
Right.
And with that, I've been talking a lot. I want to turn it back over to Dr. T and maybe ask you if you can add to this some of your knowledge about how people handle or don't handle the conflicts part of a relationship when people are struggling to decide how they're going to live as a couple.
That's a great topic. I would like to add first that oftentimes the relationships that end up in my virtual office are the dysfunctional relationships with crazy or a high conflict individual or a personality disordered individual or a pathologically entitled, and you get the idea. And oftentimes these relationships never progress past the power struggle. And what is required is that the non-disordered or non-high conflict partner basically has to resign himself or herself to putting up with a lot of crap. And that's just the way it's going to be, or that's where the relationship will fall apart and the couple separates and they go off seeking greener pastures in that honeymoon phase all over again. Now, in order to move past the power struggle phase, you need two adults who have good problem solving and conflict resolution skills.
What did you say, Dr. T? I don't think I heard you say that. Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, sure. Emotionally mature adults who have good problem-solving skills and conflict resolution skills and the ability to compromise, which, believe it or not, does mean you're going to compromise and do what I want. But that's not it. I know that's what happens to a lot of guys in mediation. That's a borderline or a narcissist's idea of compromise is, you know, you give me everything and I let you leave with your kidneys, but that's not it. That's not it. And if you don't, if one or both parts of the couple do not have good conflict skills, you're just going to go around and around and around in circles, the same conflicts that never get resolved. And you're fighting about the same stupid shit you've been fighting about for the last 5, 10, 15, 20, God forbid, 50 years.
One of the things I want to throw in here while you're talking about that, and this is, I think, particularly applies to at least the men that I've talked to and known in my life. I've heard the expression 1,000 times. You have to know how to pick your battles. And my thought on that is, man, that's really chicken shit. To me, what constitutes healthy in a relationship, is two healthy individuals. You have to have two healthy individuals with boundaries, the ability to say no, the ability to say yes, to compromise, to not have their way all the time about everything, to be flexible enough to understand that you're going to have to play by somebody else's rules sometimes, and sometimes when it's really important, you're going to have to live by your own rules. So when you're doing that, you're not picking battles so much. I mean, that whole idea of I'm going to be very wise about what I choose to fight over is, I mean, on the superficially, that sounds like wisdom. But underneath that, what I see a lot of is guys that say, I'm only going to have this much conflict. I'm only going to have this many fights. I'm only going to stand up for this many things. And then once I've stood up for a few things, then I'm going to stop for a while and not fight. I don't think that's a particularly bright or effective approach. I think what's really a lot better is to understand where your boundaries are. What's okay with you? What's not? Is it okay to hit you? Okay. If it's not okay to hit you, then it's never okay to hit you. You're not going to say, I'm going to pick my fight carefully by only arguing with her or defending myself 1 out of every 3 times she hits me. Is it okay to spend your money without your permission? Is it okay to lay around the house and not work and watch TV and spend all your time on Facebook and then demand jewelry? If you're going to pick those battles, then you're going to have a miserable life. So I think it's better to pick what your values are and to understand internally, what do you believe in? What's right for you? What's wrong for you? And then that will decide where you're going to draw your lines in life every time. Because if you don't draw them every time, you might as well not draw them the first time. Anyway, I'm sorry. Just go ahead, Dr. T. I just wanted to toss that in there.
And by the way, better to figure out what your boundaries are before you get into a relationship. Because oftentimes, at least with the folks I work with, they go in either having no boundaries or very diffuse boundaries, and they get steamrolled. And once you're in it, it's very hard to establish boundaries once you're in a boundaryless relationship. And also, if you have healthy boundaries, that's like having a can of crazy away. Because crazy likes an easy target. And if you have good, healthy, solid boundaries, crazy's going to go away and leave you alone.
Hey, and yeah, let's reiterate that for the let's say there's guys out there right now that are listening that are in between sick relationships, and they're waiting for the next cupcake to make them miserable. And there's a lot of guys out there like that, and there's frankly a lot of women out there like that too. So it applies to everybody.
I used to be one in my 20s.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I was a hound and nothing, really not much more.
I was narc bait.
And that's part of the deal too, and I think particularly for men is that so many of them don't really have standards other than, am I attracted, and will she sleep with me? And I'm sorry, guys. I mean, I know that somebody's going to think I'm just being misandric and picking on guys, but I've seen it too many times. I've seen too many guys exercise this set of standards in their life, which is she attractive? Will she sleep with me? Then the infatuation sets in. And that's not a lot to go on, I'm afraid, in life. So the challenge for you guys that are in between relationships is to maybe think before you go into the next one, how do I figure out, how to decide what's okay for me and what's not, and not let my desire to be accepted get in the way of having a boundary. Because one, I think Warren Farrell brought this up beautifully during the conference. He said that, if you exercise, some of your own thinking and your independence and your own boundaries, and a woman who, like, for instance, doesn't want to carry her weight. I mean, I know it's hard to find one of those, but you will occasionally stumble across women who think that it's your job to take care of them financially, even though they're working and have jobs. It's sort of your money is together money, and her money is her money. If you reject that from the beginning, the sooner you will find a woman that won't abuse you financially. I mean, I hate to make this sound so simplified, but it is. I've seen too many men that just totally lose their mind when they're attracted to a woman and she says yes to sex, and then all of a sudden it's just like this insanity sets in. And that's where you get hooked in. That's where Dr. T can just tell you story after story about guys that were duped by high complex borderline personalities up front in the beginning, because they can be very seductive, and then the next thing they know, they're in hell. So Dr. T, how do guys stop that from the beginning? How do you take that natural male impulse, and we all have it, to go for the reproductive strategy? It's in all of us. How do you find a way to rein that in, especially if you're a younger guy, so that you don't end up in misery down the road?
That's a great question. Well, I think, first of all, we need to start having conversations with young men, adolescent men, about sex. You know what? Getting laid is great, but it's not the end-all, be-all. And don't make legally binding decisions based on having sex with a woman you find attractive. And we also need to start talking to men about having better standards and better, higher expectations of behavior from the women they get involved with. And I touched on this in my talk at the conference. And there was also an article about this. I think it was on the Daily Mail, where they interviewed a professional matchmaker who has, in the last 10 to 15 years, noticed a trend amongst her female clients where these women are just rejecting men out of hand because they have this impossibly long laundry list or grocery shopping list of qualities that they are not willing to budge on. A man has to be tall, handsome, successful, smart, sports car, and yet, while they have these super high expectations for the men that they're willing to date, they simultaneously have a very overinflated sense of themselves, their level of attractiveness, and the value that they bring to a relationship.
Which is often very little. And let me try to put it this way, because we are trying to stick to
healthy.
This definition of healthy.
Right.
And to me, a healthy relationship is sometimes bloody. It is sometimes conflicted. It is not one where people are dancing around in tulips and like you would see on a TV commercial for selling coffee or whatever it is that people are trying to push. But it's basically two people that have a general sense of respect for each other and a general sense and willingness to protect each other from things outside the relationship. And I'm not talking about chivalry, guys. I'm not talking about, you can't offend my woman or I'll, pull out my sword and jump on my stallion and go to town. I'm talking about two people that have each other's backs in life, even through conflict, even through whatever struggles they're going through. If you've got a partner that will badmouth you to your family, to friends. A healthy partner won't even allow family and friends to badmouth you in their presence. They'll stand up and say, I'm not listening to this shit. And you won't talk this way about my partner in my presence. It'll never happen, so forget about it. That to me is, regardless of whatever conflicts or imperfections are going on inside the relationship, there's a healthy boundary around the two individuals that have self-respect for each other, and then there's another boundary around the relationship that you don't let people wander into and meddle with. And I think that's one of the biggest definers for me on what is healthy, is two people that have self-respect and that protect each other from outside forces.
And I think equally important is that neither partner puts their happiness, their needs at a higher premium than the others. Both of your needs matter. Both of your feelings matter. Both of your happiness or degree of contentment or peace or whatever it is you're striving for are equally important. And that doesn't mean you're always going to get your way or your needs met, but there's going to be give and take.
Absolutely right. And you know something? That's hard to create because, one, you can't have a really healthy relationship if one half of the equation is really fucked in the head. I mean, you can't do it. I mean, it's like a clothesline. If both ends are not standing, you're not hanging clothes on it. I'm sorry.
No, you're gonna clothesline your neck, and that doesn't feel good.
So it's like, you've heard the old expression, you can't argue with a sick mind. Listen to it. You can't argue with a sick mind. You can't have a healthy relationship with somebody who's fundamentally not healthy to begin with.
Or chronically emotionally immature, who has the emotional age of a 4-year-old. Children are very self-centered. They can't conceive of the world outside of themselves. And if you're involved with technically an adult who is like that, you can't have an adult relationship with a child, and you can't have an adult relationship with an adult who has the emotional maturity of a child or an adolescent, for that matter.
And that happens on both sides of the relationship fence a lot. One of the things Dr. T talked about in her talk at the conference was cultural narcissism, which is really, anybody can see it. Take a look through Facebook and tell me you don't see 200 million narcissists having a fest on there. It is incredible, the level of narcissism. One of the pictures that she used, the images, was of the suicide jumper. A woman saw a man about to kill himself by jumping off a bridge and thought,
the Brooklyn Bridge.
Selfie! And so she takes a photo of herself with the jumper in the background because she thinks it's funny. This is the kind of culture we live in. So, one of the things you're going to have to do if you do want a healthy relationship, if you ever want one, is you're going to have to learn how to be picky. And you're going to have to learn how to screen people, and you have to learn how to be healthy yourself. Because if you're running around chasing women and your only standard is whether or not they'll sleep with you, then you're not healthy. You're not going to ever have a healthy relationship like that. You have to have some standards, and it always goes back to the onus being on the individual to make a healthy relationship happen first by being healthy themselves. Because, like I said, if you got no standards,
and know what your deal breakers and deal makers are. I don't think most people even think about that in any meaningful way. And I'm not just talking about, okay, she's attractive, he's employed, but how much disrespect are you willing to tolerate? Hopefully none.
And that's a real big problem for younger men, because I got to tell you, Dr. T, when I was 22, if a woman had a nice body and a pretty face, I was like, deal. She met all my standards right there. It's like, holy cow, of course. Oh, say yes.
Well, and you know what? I think a lot of that is just wiring and immaturity, and that's probably never going to change. So let's talk about sex education. Don't get pregnant if you're going to go you're gonna go playing around in that in shark-infested waters between the ages of 17 and 25, condom, 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 and don't get married until you're thinking more clearly. If that is, if you get married at all. Frankly, if I were a man, no way I'd get married in this country with the divorce laws we have, but that's a topic for another show.
Well, no, and you don't have to be married to have a healthy relationship. I've been with the same partner going on 13 years. I am not married, and I will never be married.
Well, and that's another thing. You know, what a healthy relationship is doesn't necessarily have to look like what the media tells you or depicts as a healthy relationship, or even anything conventional. What matters is that it works for the two individuals who are in it, with the benefit of marriage or without marriage, living together or living separately.
I wonder, going back just a moment to what you were talking about with the education, and I think it's a great social experiment waiting to happen. I wonder what would happen with our boys if we started early with them and sent them the messages regularly about how their biological impulses can lead them to trouble, and started teaching them about, you know, how do you select somebody that you're going to be vulnerable to? Because when you're talking about being in a relationship, you're talking about literally having your neck on a chopping block, and that goes for both parties, because there's emotional, financial, physical consequences for everybody in relationships. But I wonder if we could intervene in that, because the urge for men is so strong, and for women too. But I wonder if we could intervene in that if we raised our boys through high school, teaching them about high conflict personalities, about the consequences of having no or low standards, and how they select partners, and constantly reinforce that in their lives. I wonder if it would make an impact on a 22-year-old, or if it would all just be a waste of time.
Well, it might not have that much of an impact on a hormone-fueled 22-year-old college student, but I think we should definitely be sowing those seeds, because it might take root at 23, 24, 25. In order for that to happen, however, I think as a whole, our society is going to have to lose this sense of preciousness about little girls and women and sex being this thing that a woman bestows in gifts upon a man, and he should be so ever so grateful to get it, and he's just a big hairy horny beast who's, you know, slathering after sex, and that you know, sex is something that a lot of women enjoy just as much as men, and want just as much as men, and sometimes more so. I mean, sexual assault with men happens. Absolutely does. Especially, it's oftentimes when alcohol is involved. Who is that comedian? Can't remember her name. Amy. Doesn't matter. Who did a talk where she basically talked about she sexually assaulted a drunk guy in college who was so inebriated he didn't even know what her name was. So that happens, but we need to change this view that women are sort of these pristine little flowers who will grant their favors. And get real about it. Encourage boys to be just as choosy as we encourage our you know, girls and women to be in their selection of partners.
That's part of what I was thinking, that if we ever did have a grand social experiment where we could try to educate young boys as they go through adolescence and all those hormonal physical changes that happen to them, and the very strong urges and drives that come up during that time, if we could reach them at the same time, I think it would probably be a little bit helpful if we were sitting our young girls down and saying, first, take off the tiara. You know, that's going into the trash can, and you're going to pay attention that you are not a special snowflake, and you're not supposed to be. And start telling them that you really are supposed to bring something, that if you want to be seen as more than a pair of boobs and a butt, that you need to bring something else to a relationship. And we, unfortunately...
beside boobs and debt.
Yeah, boobs and debt.
I can't remember who it was, but the new acronym, STD, sexually transmitted debt. It was someone on my forum who came up with that.
That's funny, only it's, you know what, it's not funny.
No, it's not funny. It's not. It's not.
And there is a lot of sexually transmitted debt. But I wonder what kind of relationship world we could have between men and women if we started raising girls without this Disney princess mentality and teaching them that they really had, if they wanted self-respect, if they wanted anything other than just the power to wiggle their finger and have somebody come do them, which is easy enough for women to do.
More like do for them.
Yes, do for them. I wonder if we could actually have an impact, or if we would still end up with what we have, which in this culture is predominantly, I think, dominated by a culture of women with a sense of entitlement and a culture of men that are only too happy to feed into that for a pat on the head and good boy.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There's a book, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's about different love styles. And every now and again, I get a new client who he and his wife or his girlfriend have read this book. And so there are 5 basic love styles. And invariably, the love style of the woman, the girlfriend or the wife, is acts of service. That's acts of service. That's what they recognize as love, is their partner doing for them.
I read, and I'm going to do a little good-natured poking at John Gray here. I read years ago. I read his book, Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus. It should have been.
And that book is in my trash can.
Yes. It should have been.
Didn't his wife take him to the cleaners?
Something like that. I think it should have been Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Lord and Taylor. But he had a list of 10 things in that book for men and women. 10 things that men could do to have a healthier, better relationship with women, and then 10 things that women could do to have a healthier, better relationship with men. And the list for men was buy jewelry, take them on expensive vacations, take out the trash, help them do house chores, fix their cars, buy them things, support them, take care of them, spend 10 different ways basically to spend money on them. And his list for women was 10 different creative ways to say thanks. And I'm like, come on, John. No wonder you're named John. You are one.
Oh, golly.
Anyway, maybe that picking on him wasn't as good-natured as I started out. But that sort of thing, when that passes, and you're talking about a book that millions of women bought, and millions, and did him really good things financially, I'm sure.
And his ex-wife.
Yeah, well, yes, ultimately some financial help and I'm sure she had some creative ways to say thank you when she made off with half of the book proceeds. But
Men Are from Mars, and their assets is in my bank in the Cayman. Yeah.
So it's like when that is the top-selling book for a couple of years on relationships, where you tell guys you're basically a John, your job is to shell out, and her job is to say thanks, buddy. That's a pretty good deal for women if they're shallow and materialistic and utterly useless as a healthy partner. But where on earth? I mean, I've never read a book on relationships that was about having healthy relationships. The only books I've ever read on relationships, and I've read a lot of them, were about enabling entitlement in women, and men becoming a part of that process. You know why? Because that's what sells books to women who want to justify enabling their entitlement. And so women are being totally disrespected by people that are writing these books and selling them, and they're being told that they're whores, and they're proving it when they keep buying these books and they keep reading.
And petulant children.
Yes, that's the message. That's what the self-help industry has offered women, is reinforcement for their psychiatric disorders. Not really, I think, I mean, maybe good marketing, but really doesn't do much for the idea of healthy relationships and the idea of mutual sacrifice and shared respect and boundaries around a relationship, none of which have anything to do with money or entitlement. They all have to do with character. And it's a sad state of affairs, but I tell you what, if you want to hear the truth out, you're going to hear it here more than you're going to hear it from them, because
Well,
those,
and it also flies in the face of basic psychology and common sense. I mean, what do you value in your life? The things you worked hard to achieve and had a real sense of accomplishment over, or the things that you were just handed?
oh, absolutely, and I
Oh,
think
and that's why you see these women, okay, nice tennis bracelet. Next, okay, oh, I have a new Range Rover. Okay, next, what else have you got? And when you spend your life sitting around waiting for somebody else to make all of your dreams come true and make you happy, it's a recipe for disappointment, because I just don't think it's possible to truly appreciate and value that which you have not put effort into attaining.
one of the things that I think that we probably would help women with is to simply not just allow them this blanket pass in society to lie to themselves about what they want. Because I've heard, you go to watch any daytime talk show and hear what women want from men. Oh, I want a guy that's sensitive, a guy that, no, you don't. Just get out of my face with that bullshit. Uh, Women have been trained to sit around and lie to each other about what they really want in men, and then they go off and they find what they really want, but they don't talk about it. They talk about an entirely different set of standards that they have in men than they actually practice in real life, and then we sit here, and of course men, they reinforce it. Folks, I'm not just pointing the finger at women here. This is a shared problem. It's a cycle of behavior between men and women that keeps getting perpetuated because men won't say no to it, and women can't say anything else but yes to it. It's absolutely crazy, but it doesn't foster healthy relationships. It doesn't help us that we're lying about what we want. And men don't even feel like they can say what they want for real.
Well, and when they do, they're told they're wrong for wanting it,
Yes.
or that's not how it is.
There's a big one on feelings with that. I love how I spent so many years in the field of psychology listening to really absolute, I mean, these were some of the most contemptuous clinical practitioners that I ever met in my life, arrogant and condescending as hell, sitting around talking down their nose at men about men not being able to express feelings. And the moment that a man expressed any feeling that they disapproved of, they went directly into shame mode and
Yep.
slapped him down for having anything to say. Absolutely, that's the craziness we live in. So maybe that's why when we started this talk today, Dr. T, about healthy relationships, we both broke out laughing when we even said the word, because it's not because healthy relationships are not available. They are. They take a lot of work. They may not look like what a lot of people think they should look like, but they are available. But the fact of the matter is that we live in an unhealthy culture that doesn't foster healthy relationship. We live in a culture that encourages us to lie about men and to lie about women and to deceive each other and to practice this open deceit with each other as though it's not happening. And we are now surprised that most marriages fail and that children are destroyed from it in the process, and that we just put Chris Mackney's story up on the site that men end up killing themselves because they can't take the pain of a ruinous family court system. It's hard to talk about healthy relationships, but we need to. But I do think it does start with the individual. If you want a healthy relationship and if you won't settle for anything but a healthy relationship, it doesn't mean you're going to be alone. I believe most people will find them if they really make up their mind that they're not going to settle for anything else.
And honestly, if you're comfortable with yourself and have a good sense of self, who you are, you'd rather be alone than be in a bad relationship, because it's just awful. It's absolutely awful. And it occurs to me now something else we should discuss regarding healthy relationships is, and I notice this in a lot of the work I do, a lot of men and women grow up with some really cockamamie, faulty beliefs about relationships. Like, it's my job to make my partner happy. I can't be happy unless my partner's happy. I can't be loved unless I'm perfect. And I mean, there are a whole host of others. And these are messages, oftentimes implicit, barely conscious messages that we learn as children from our parents, from our families. And a lot of helping someone to progress developmentally to a point where they can have a healthy relationship is uncovering what their relationship beliefs are, which oftentimes they're not even aware of, and getting rid of the ones that are just bullshit and replacing them with healthier, adaptive ones.
I couldn't agree more. Well, let's see. How long have we been at this now? It looks about close to 45 minutes, which is normally the length of one of our programs here. And I'm sitting here trying to think if I don't know if we can add anything else to this than we've already said. I do want to invite people tomorrow to tune in here to my channel. I'm going to engage in a debate with Matt Bender, or I'm sorry if I don't know.
Bend over and take it.
I can't pronounce his name any worse than he pronounced mine. But we're going to talk, have a debate about a video that he made where he connected Elliot Rodger to the men's movement, and
will he be wearing his tinfoil hat?
Yes, well, I'm not going to get into it too much. I'm going to save, what I have to say about that for the debate itself, and in fairness to him, because we are going to treat him fairly. I mean, I'm not going to launch into the debate here, but I do want people to know that tomorrow at the same time that we did this show, that we're going to have that debate. It's going to be hosted by Dean Esme. We will be giving him equal and uninterrupted time to make his case. We're going to listen to what he has to say and give other people and him an opportunity to listen to what I have to say on this subject. So we're looking forward to that, so you can tune into that tomorrow. Look for I would guess in just a few weeks, look for the second annual International Conference on Men's Issues to be announced. We have already started preliminary plans working on that, and I want to tell you again that we were so excited after the conference. It was an amazing event for the people that were there, and hopefully more people will be able to make it to the next one. But we have begun planning already, as exhausted as we made ourselves over the venue change and everything else. We have more or less taken a slight breather and dug right back into learning from our mistakes on this one. By the way, if you attended the conference and you have any ideas for suggesting on how we could improve it next time, if there was anything that we could do that you think would make it a better conference for the attendees and for the speakers, by all means get a hold of us and let us know, because we are going through and assessing all of our mistakes from this last one and planning on doing better with the next one. In the meantime, go ahead.
Do we have any questions or comments from the folks on YouTube that we want to take before we wrap up?
I'm still in emergency mode here. I'm waiting for my main computer to be back. So
okay.
All the options I've just barely made it onto this deal. So
got it.
Hopefully, if there's questions there, we'll try to get to them in our next program. I'm really glad to be back here doing this with you.
Likewise.
Enjoy doing this together. I think it really does offer something to men that they're not getting anywhere else. And I'm glad to know that they can come here and get it for free, just like they can at shrinkformen.com. And so I want to just give a shout out about that. If you think you might be in an abusive relationship, or on the other hand, If you're absolutely certain that you're in an abusive relationship, if you're waking up every day next to the demon from hell and they're making you miserable, or that you've already separated and they continue to make you miserable, visit shrinkformen.com and start reading articles there. One, you will identify with them a great deal. You'll learn a lot from them. Also, Dr. T offers services for fee available online through the internet, which you can avail yourself to. She knows this subject as well as anybody that I've ever met before. So I would suggest you maybe take a look at that if you need some additional help. And, of course, if you just want to read more generally about men's issues and about the advancements that we're making in the men's rights movement, and make no mistake about it, Warren Farrell brought this up at the conference, and I will reiterate it here. If anybody thinks that this movement isn't growing, at this point they must be delusional, because we are not only growing, we're growing rapidly, making lots of progress, and we're finally, over the next year or two, going to really start getting these issues mainstreamed. I know that the feminist ideologues are just all doing the crazy dance, the chicken dance around, and making little voodoo dolls of us and sticking pins in it. And you know what? It's not doing them any good. We're going to continue to keep coming at these problems in a way that's realistic and we believe healthy, and they are always welcome to join us in finding evidence-based solutions to social problems. They are just not welcome to come in and tell us anymore that the problems of the world can be blamed on men. And with that, I will offer Dr. T any opportunity she wants. We usually predict that she doesn't have parting words because she says what she wants for the program. But is there anything you would like to say?
Just an announcement for next week's show. We're going to have a guest join us, Terrence Popp of Redonkulous.com and of secondclasscitizen.org, also the writer of a very powerful video that was shown at the conference, Purple Heart's Final Beats. Had just about everybody that was around me in tears and sniffling, including myself. And the topic is going to be administrative violence and guerrilla war tactics, guerrilla divorce tactics when you're trying to get out of a marriage. I did. Freudian slip. When you're trying to extricate yourself from a bad marriage with a woman who is bent on taking you down, stealing your kids, and causing havoc. So, and
if anybody would know about that, Terrence Popp would. I don't know if you get a chance, look at his presentation. I was crying when it was done. I turned to my right, I turned to my left. I didn't see a dry eye anywhere.
Except maybe Monica Hess of the Washington Post.
Yeah, I think maybe she was doing her happy dance at that point. Maybe it was the high point in the conference for her. I don't know. It's one of the things. Oh, speaking of Monica Hess, no, never mind. I'm not going to do that.
Save it for the intelligence report on Monday.
We'll save it for the intelligence report, and we will be back with that. I want to say we're glad to be back, glad to be doing this again. Looking forward to coming back to the intelligence report on Monday. There's the debate tomorrow night. There's Terrence Popp next week here with Dr. T and I. And with that, I'm going to wish everybody a good day and a healthy relationship.
Bye.